Hi, my name is William Schaeffer with another book review, and today is a book from the Way People Live series, Life During the Russian Revolution by Victoria Sherrow. This is another book in the Way People Live series. This book was published in 1998. And I enjoy reading the books in the series. Although they're written for high school students or maybe junior high students, adults can still learn a lot from these books. And I learned a lot from reading this book, even though I consider myself to be already fairly intelligent. This book is about the events that led up to the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. And this was a dramatic turning point for Russia and really for the entire world. And this is still playing itself out nearly 100 years later. Much of life in Russia and life at that time is really absolutely unfamiliar to us who live in the United States. And that's one thing I like about this book, is they give you a flavor of what it was like to live in a different society that there's no way you could be familiar with living in that society. Even though people are generally the same at all times and all around the world, different situations were very unique in Russian society at that time. Now, I'll leave most of the book to you and won't make this a history lesson. But some of the things I liked about the book was they talked about the character and the personality of Tsar Nicholas and the Tsars, his father and his grandfather, leading up to his position. And apparently he was kind of a mild, nice guy, homebody by nature. And this led to him not taking the forceful stand that that might have changed the outcome for him and his family. Now, one thing that I really like about this book was chapter 3, was life in Moscow and the cities. And one thing we don't realize is most of Russia was, in the 1800s, was serfs. They were slaves living on plantations, and they were treated like slaves. And as the economy changed, a lot of them went to the cities to find work and work in the factories. And around 1900, the situation was pretty grim. 60% of the factory workers slept underneath their workbench with their families. At the turn of the 1900s, 60% of the labor force was homeless, and they were serfs that were forced to live under their workbenches after working workdays of 12 to 18 hours, 6 days a week. So the slavery on the plantation or the large agricultural estates was replaced by slavery in the factories. That was arguably even a worse situation because it was in the crowded city slums. There were some half-hearted attempts by the government of Tsar Nicholas to address this, but they were inadequate because Russian society itself had a vast disparity of wealth. The majority of people living in Russia were peasants, and they were either serfs that were slaves on the plantation, or they were homeless living in the cities and working in the factories. At the same time, all of the wealth of the country was owned by a very small number of people, about 1%. The royalty, all the kings and dukes and duchesses and queens and prince and princesses and whatever their real titles were, owned all the property and all the businesses. And the disparity of wealth was even more pronounced than it is in the United States today, as hard as that is to believe. But the poor in Russia had a very bad situation. And it was out of these homeless poor working in the slums and factories that the Red Army was eventually born and the Soviet Union came into being. All the events leading up to the Bolshevik Revolution and the cultural conditions and social conditions of the previous 50 years are treated in a pretty good way in this book, The Russian Revolution. Therefore, I highly recommend reading The Russian Revolution by Victoria Sherrow, part of the Way People Live series. I guarantee you will find it educational and interesting.